There are no shortages of great ideas and best practices and solutions that come out when it comes to the customer experience. Whether you're talking about ways to optimize your agents, better understand your customers, whether you're talking about new technology into which to invest, there's always the idea of, what great things you can accomplish. And a lot of times this is very valuable. I think we need to be considering these trends. We need to be considering these different technologies because they are going to empower us to better connect with customers. They are going to make the operation more efficient. They are going to help us achieve those goals. But here is where it's important to note what I just said there, achieve goals. You really have to have an understanding as you start to source technology and consider which trends to follow, or quite frankly, just consider how to set up your customer experience strategy. You must have that sense of why in your mind. You must know what you're trying to accomplish. What is that strategic vision, both for the short term and the long term? What role does your contact center or customer experience function play, not only within, the day-to-day, but also in the lives of your customers long-term, as well as in the overall business narrative? Thinking about that why is going to be the centerpiece of really determining how to invest, how to use, and ultimately how to deliver for your customers. We can understand that why concept very clearly when it comes to the idea of customer intent. We're always talking about how, agents need to understand what customers are trying to achieve in order to best serve them. Well, really, the goal of today's discussion is to extrapolate that on the broader perspective. What is your business trying to achieve? What role does the contact center play in achieving that? And therefore, based on all that knowledge, what should you be doing from a platform perspective? Because at the end of the day, there's going to be any number of platforms that you can select out there, but you need to make sure you're selecting the ones that really achieve the goal. Don't let the platform dictate what the customer experience looks like. Let your customer experience design dictate what platforms you use. To walk us through this topic will be Bryant. He is going to be speaking at CCW Fall in Austin, and so naturally we wanted to have his take here on CCW Fall online. He's actually going to be part of a panel discussing this very topic, but we thought we'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert, get some knowledge from him right now, and then ultimately kind of lead into some of the discussions we can expect to have in Austin. So Bryant, how is everything?
Great. Thank you very much for having me.
Perfect. So jumping right in, I think at the top level, we have to understand what customers are looking for. Because if we're going to build a customer experience, if we're going to source the right solutions, we need to know what we're trying to achieve. So at the customer level, the end consumer, if you want to refer to them as, what are they looking for when it comes to the customer experience?
Yeah, I think that for us, the end consumer, the best way to have insights is to kind of look into yourself and you as a consumer. What are you looking for? What has defined? We've all had bad experiences. We've all had great experiences. And what are some of those elements that, surface in your mind of those experiences that you've had that really characterize it being a great experience or a poor experience? And for us, it centers around three real things. And the first, and these are more principle type elements. And the first for us is was it simple for us to get help? Was there a lot of friction points where we thrown up a lot of barriers and just to get to somebody live or get the answers we're seeking? That's been the first principle for us. The second is was it fast to get this answer? The amount of time it took them to get from question to solution. And finally, which is a harder thing, did you feel that the company that you were working with was empathetic to what your problem set was? Did they understand? Were they actually able to get that problem and then provide you the right answer that you're looking for?
Definitely, and so those are all very valuable. And like you said, the fact that we are, even though we're professionals in this space, the fact that we also are customers, I think it's very easy to relate to all the different points that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. But so where is the CX going wrong? Where are contact centers going wrong when it comes to actually delivering those great experiences, delivering those key tenets that you talked about?
Yeah, so I think my personal view is I think it's more of how the company's internally, what is your strategy? What are you trying to achieve with support? I have to take a step back because if it's viewed that support is more of a cost of doing business, you have to have it, then you're always going to end up focusing on things like cost reductions and efficiencies and ensuring that, when things go bump in the night, you have an answer for. But that doesn't necessarily enrich the experience overall, and then therefore leading to a better loyalty of the platform or service or product you're eventually trying to sell. where things have gone wrong is where there's been this focus for, at least I've seen, for greater cost efficiencies. The advent of this concept of self-service, where you can go online and self-solve your problem. That term for me in particular, I've never really liked, because it sort of meant that the customer was doing work for you, where it should really be reversed around. But where things have gone wrong is when you've bumped up against barriers because you're trying to find ways to deflect and reduce costs of things like a very lengthy IVR call tree. We all remember those from the years past, where it was press 1 for this, press 3 for this, and by the time a user has gotten through several layers, they've gotten frustrated and very upset. So not only you may have saved costs, but you've damaged that relationship with that customer for a long term. We've seen some of that happen also in the digital space, where a consumer customer is looking for finding just help on something, and they're presented with barriers. They're presented with things like, please check this knowledge base first, or please check this FAQ. Please answer these following questions, and what they may be really looking for is just a number to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and so that kind of gets into the second part of the question, and what I'm curious about is this idea that we often refer to self-service. The narrative recently has been customers want to serve themselves. They don't want to deal with a live agent. And so, obviously this is a tool that can make things better for them. But I think you really painted the other picture, where if the perception is wrong, or if it ends up creating a lot more work, it could actually be a negative for the customer. And so, thinking about that more broadly, I'm wondering if there are any sort of trends or certain kinds of technologies, or even some best practices that are designed supposedly to reduce customer friction, to increase customer satisfaction, but actually make life harder and more frustrating for them.
Yeah, so I think that it's a great question. What I've seen, at least in some of the things that we're sort of investigating on our side, we're looking at a couple of components. One is things like omnichannel. And where that comes into play is it reduces the friction for the customer. They don't have to repeat their problem over and over again. The thread that they may start on one channel, whether that be chat or email or a phone call, it threads over to the next. That's something we're sort of excited about. We're exploring that. We do believe that it's additive back to those 3 principles I sort of mentioned earlier on this call. That's one area. The second area that we have interest in is around AI, and I know it's sort of the latest buzzword, but things like chatbots, things like assistants and search capabilities that enable for the consumers to have better choice, that gets them to a speedier answer and less effort on their part to find the solutions they're looking for, to find help for their problems. Those are two areas that we're innately interested in and exploring, that we believe will kind of right and mitigate some of these issues in terms of friction that we've seen, at least on the CX side.
And I wonder, about thinking about any recommended ideas for fixing those challenges. I know from my perspective, one of the ideas and one of the big, I think, buzz phrases has always been that basically start thinking about what the customer is actually experiencing, right? So, obviously we talk about, going back to self-service for a second, we talked about self-service as this great positive that's going to reduce everyone's effort and make everything more convenient. And yet let's not forget, IVR can be a self-service tool, and a lot of customers for many years hated the idea of the IVR experience because it was actually very frustrating. And so a lot of times the knock on that was that businesses were thinking, how can I deflect calls? How can I reduce, the amount of time agents are spending with customers,
exactly,
as opposed to how can I actually, make things better for the customer. So starting with that, what are some recommendations for maybe switching from this technology is awesome, it's going to make things more efficient, to this technology is awesome because it makes things better for the customer, and if it so happens to increase efficiency, that's great news for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. I think that goes back to your opening statement. I think that fundamentally what you have to get back to is, what is the business trying to achieve? You as your organization, what is your end goal? What would you like the experience to be, and how do you think that can be accretive to the overall loyalty and value of the customers that you're trying to provide services or support or products to? For us, at least anyways, we think about some of those friction points. Those are those are areas that we definitely put some thought into. You have to come up with what it fundamentally comes back to what your objectives are going to be, how you're going to measure those objectives. To your point, IVR is definitely a great tool, but if you're always focused on a cost reduction, if it's a cost reduction objective, then you end up creating barriers. How does it weave into the overall journey of that customer? And you may actually want to have an IVR, but after they go through one or two steps, immediately kick them to a live person. That improves the overall experience. The other thing I'd mention too is we've been in parts where we've done a lot of investments into major platforms. There's a lot of functionality, and just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you would want to do something. We have examples where we've invested into new technologies but haven't turned on certain elements because it didn't add to the journey of the customer, going back to did it make things faster, did it make things easier for the customer, and did it provide some empathy back to them, and that we understood what their needs were and we could provide them better support.
Now, I don't want to think, we can talk about how the customer has to come first, and I think we all kind of philosophically, at least those who are going to be listening to this call, probably share that viewpoint, but we all can't be completely idealistic or naive. We do know that we are in the business world, and we do know that there are going to be some broader business objectives that may not at least cleanly align with everything we think about the idea of customer centricity. So when you think about what the broader business is demanding out of the customer experience, what value it wants the customer experience to have, where are we with that? What does the ultimate overall business think about what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I'd say it should be a balance. I don't think cost savings and an excellent customer experience need to be mutually exclusive. I think they can be very good complements for what you're trying to achieve in terms of an objective. To your point, you can't have a white glove treatment for everyone. There has to be some level of cost efficiencies in mind. I like the concept you brought up earlier. So you think of an IVR. IVR has a great place in your suite of different support channels that you may end up providing a customer. A customer just may want a quick answer, and dialing a number and getting an automated response might be a lot faster for them and a good choice for them, and it has a place. The way that we've solved it is it's a holistic scorecard. It is, you have a set of KPIs that you want to achieve that measures and balances very accurately within the business of what you think the cost is going to look like. Can we do this effective in terms of scale? But also, what does that journey look like? Because there's a short-term component and there's a long-term component, and that long-term component usually gets measured in KPIs such as NPS or what their satisfaction scores are, what level of effort have they put into it. Those are equally as important against can we do this cost-effective, and is there good scalability options? The way that our business looks at our support team is it's a value driver. Our business is definitely one of a relationship-driven. It's a long-term partnership that we have with our clientele. That our success is measured not on a transaction. Our success is measured on the sum of all of the accumulation of the interactions we've done with that client. So we measure success on a good balanced set of KPIs that are both short and long-term viewed.
Makes sense. And so, any common mistakes, I think, when you try to navigate this balance? Because I think that, when you're the idea that, you don't have to be mutually exclusive, that you can be customer first and business first, as you try to implement that mindset within your organization, are there any common areas where maybe you see certain individuals, certain businesses going wrong?
That's a great question. So my response to that it would be that certainly in the companies that I've dealt with, and certainly the company that I'm in currently today, it is when there's a misweight. So to your point, it's a push and pull struggle. You're always going to have, every company has a bottom line they need to meet. There will be pressures on getting more and more efficient. In the support world, it's a constant. It is, how do we get better economies of scale? How do we invest in technologies that make us more efficient, or make the channels more deflective? But when companies do not have a corresponding view of what the loyalty, the promotional level of that customer is going to be for you from a longer term view, that's where they have some shortcomings, and that's where I think that there's pitfalls that occur. The support teams need to be an advocate for the clients that they end up representing, and a voice into the businesses that they're part of, and they need to advocate for that level of balance that needs to occur with their management teams.
Yeah, and I mean, in fairness, I probably stacked the deck on that question because I frankly, by saying that you can be customer first and business first, a lot of organizations aren't kind of establishing that balance. And I think, frankly, that's where a lot of them end up going wrong, is that they start to look at it from the standpoint of, I either need to focus on cost, or I'm going to be a contact center person, I'm just going to ignore cost and only think about customer satisfaction. And therefore, that to me is probably the biggest mistake area, is when you don't exercise that balance. You don't think about the fact that you can solve both at the same time, and that the customer objective and the business objective in the long term are similar, and it's about finding ways to satisfy both through your decisions, through your processes, and through your people.
I agree. I think it also depends on what kind of business you have. So if your strategy is to have a very small set of clientele, then certainly the customer first attitude might make the most sense. I think for most of the companies that are out there, though, if they start off, say, with the customer first strategy and objective, some of the pitfalls they may end up coming across is, great, we have a wonderful experience for our clients, but we can't scale it and we can't replicate it to all the clients that we want to have, and we provide products or services to. So very similar, there are pitfalls when you overweight on one side versus the other, and I think companies need to really think both and really balance both.
So kind of then getting into starting to take action. And so obviously there are so many trends, so many buzzwords, so many best practices out there. I think that's kind of this, having covered this as an analyst for quite a while, I have kind of seen every buzzword. Every week there seems to be some new hot topic that people are talking about. And so obviously, no one has unlimited resources, no one has unlimited capability to make change, and so you have to prioritize things. How do you decide which of these many buzzwords, these many popular topics matter most to your organization and its customer experience?
Yeah, it's sometimes often hard to keep up with all the new things that are coming up. To your point, there's always a new buzzword. I'd say our internal evaluation always goes back to our original principles. So in the early part of this call, I mentioned that we look at three things. Is it going to be faster? Is it going to be simpler? And is there some level of empathy that occurs? And if it's not accretive or additive to those three principles, then we deprioritize those items. It's not something we necessarily want to investigate in. The other elements I think we also look at from just a best practices view is it's helpful to see if it truly is a trend or is it a fad. So have some companies seen success from it, and can we get some learnings from those successes? What were some of the cases what was some of the use case that they went through that may have applicability to your business? New technologies may exist, and you don't want to necessarily just do it just for the sake of doing it. You want to know how it weaves into your overall experience that you as a company is trying to provide back to your clients.
Yeah, and so it's almost like basically, if I follow correctly, you're essentially saying that if the trend aligns with the core values, your core objectives, what you see as what you and your customer see as the ultimate experience, that's where you start to maybe take it seriously. But you're not necessarily, unless there's a lot of proof of success or a lot of proof of viability, redefining your expectation of what is right and wrong just because something happens to be a trend.
Correct.
So, obviously, given that we know what your framework is, are there any particular hot topics? I mean, I think you identified frictionless, you talked about omni-channel, but are there any, other kind of hot topics, kind of buzzworthy areas that you're kind of focusing on as an organization right now?
Yeah, besides the two that I mentioned, so I think omni-channel is sort of an interest to us just because of the friction part. AI is interesting too, just in terms of speed and simplicity for the end client, being able to answer very simpler questions. We think there's value there. And the third one that is a little bit more internal focused, it's a bit of a buzzword, but it's something that we're investigating in, is robotic process automation. It's not necessarily a new term. It's in existence for a little while, but it's mainly inward focused. It's a technology that enables um, entities to do routine work automated on their own that may not be client-facing. So think of things like report generation or form filling. We all have that, I think, in our respective companies. But things that enable all that manual, low-level work that gets off the plate of our support people, so they can then focus on a better experience and more value add and more higher level of technical capabilities back to the end customer. Those are ones that's another area that we're certainly looking at and very interested in.
And that right there demonstrates the importance of why. I think, you're not doing it, yeah, robots are cool and all, automation's awesome, but you're not doing it because those happen to be exciting pieces of technology, maybe a little bit, but let's be real. The real reason it seems like it's valuable is because you care about creating better experiences for customers, and that work kind of distracts from that ability to do that. It's lower value work, and so if you can minimize the time agents commit to that, maximize the time they commit to connecting with customers, everyone's going to win in that scenario.
Absolutely, and going back to the earlier point you made in terms of the balance, that technology is also interesting to us because from a balance perspective, it also helps reduce some of the costs because you eliminate that manual work.
Absolutely, it's a win-win scenario. And so, looking at sourcing new solutions, one of the, obviously this can be a very broad, we could have a 2-hour discussion about this, but any tips as far as, obviously there are going to be plenty of organizations where it's not necessarily the person who sets customer experience strategy that is the only stakeholder when it comes to buying technology. So to what extent can you kind of, speaking to our audience of primarily customer management professionals, to what extent can they sort of help guide the sourcing process so you do get the right outcomes for your customers and for your business?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on which technology you want to look at deploying. So if we think of a larger one, so platform-based ones, so you can think of cloud SaaS solutions as an example. When you're sourcing new technologies, you want to certainly look at, as much as you're looking at the experience of a client and you want to have a balanced approach, you also want to have a balanced approach when you're investigating new technologies. It has to fundamentally come back to, will it add to the experience you're trying to create? And are there good success measures you want to try to achieve, and this is helping you to get there? As you're looking at the technology solutions, a few things that we've found were very helpful is, what is the total cost of ownership for it? All in. So not just the implementation of it, but the training, the ability to find the resources that understand this technology that can help you grow and evolve it over time. That's certainly one element that we look at. The other element that we look at is there a good functionality fit? So is it going to help you meet your roadmap needs of what, again, going back to what you think the experience should look like for your clients, and is it going to help you meet some of those objectives, and does it fit very well? And the third, from a platform, if I'm thinking in terms of a platform example, is there a good breadth of the ecosystem that supports that platform? So are there good system integrators that are involved? Are there good partners or consultants that, as you expand this capability and may want to grow and evolve with it, are there good resources in the market that you can pull in, maybe hire internally or partner with or contract with to help you grow and help it to more tailor fit to your specific needs? That ecosystem, whether that be partners or apps or what have you, a marketplace, that's certainly an important part to understand the extensibleness of the platform that you want to make investments in.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, I think it'd be great if the customer management, customer-facing kind of side of the business could be heavily involved in the actual sourcing and purchasing. I think there are tactics for leaders to take on a bigger role, but it's maybe not something that you're just going to fix overnight. However, implementation is going to be more centralized within the departments that are actually using the technology. And so from your perspective, who really needs to have a seat at the table when it comes to actually implementing and understanding how the technology is going to transform and affect the business?
Yeah, so for when we've done implementation, I think we've done it with a core team, to your point. You don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen. You don't want to have a team of 50 people, as an example, spread throughout all the world. It usually needs to be a very small, tight-knit core team that ideally actually coexists and sits next to each other on a day-in, day-out basis so they can bounce ideas off of each other as they move through this. But you have one layer that has your common partnership with technology, business user groups that need to be in there as well. And within those, you'd have your very specified roles of project managers, business analysts that can translate flows and workflows and process into technology solutions and liaise with the technical solutions analysts that can then understand what that means into how it manifests itself in terms of technology in and of itself. We've also found in an implementation, you need a secondary layer. So a layer of either power users or champions and advocates within the user groups, the support teams themselves, that can help guide how the tool or the technology you're trying to build, help custom fit it to your needs into very specific use cases that you run against. They also then have an additive value in, as you're trying to train and roll it out to the broader organization or even to your customers, they become your advocates within those specific teams that can help onboard and help promote and help increase adoption rates right out the gate.
Now, what about results and managing expectations? And I don't just mean reporting to the higher level of the business. I also think results and expectations matter looking downward, because I think that, agents there may be a learning curve. There may be changes that they have to accept. And so making sure that they're on board and they recognize they can start to see the value of what they're learning and what they're spending time getting comfortable with, kind of how do you manage expectations throughout the business, whether you're talking about at what point should the ROI start to show itself, or at what point should the ease of use and the accessibility start to show itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. We have a fairly rigorous process, at least internally, with our own company. Before we make any investments, we do set up what we think the objectives and KPIs are going to be, and they're balanced, as I mentioned earlier. We do have set measurement times in terms of immediately at launch, 1 month in, a quarter in, and do we start seeing those measures and improvements? We typically provide a range. So with every project, whatever investment you make, nothing ever really lands out what you think you're going to get. You're not going to land exactly on the number of ROI, to your point, or benefit or return, to your point. Businesses change, businesses morph, they're very dynamic. The landscape and the characteristics and the pressures change. But we do provide what we think is going to be against a balanced level of metrics, whether they be client loyalty or satisfaction, or cost improvements or reductions or scalability. We look across a spectrum of metrics, and not a inundating level of metrics. So you don't want to necessarily look at 50 as an example. You probably want to look at 5, maybe 10. Things that are give you a sense of, is this investment making an impact? ROI is certainly something you certainly want to look at, but ROI is not going to measure in the short term how has it impacted to the client experience overall. So going back to that balance concept, there's going to be this level of qualitative and quantitative elements that do appear. Some will show up financially, and some will show up more that the experience itself has gotten better, and you have a better health of that relationship with the customer they're trying to build with. But we provide a target level and a range where we think is within what we hope it should land. If it falls outside of that range, it does provide a good learning opportunity to see if you can adjust and adapt and change for the next iteration and the next round of improvements.
It comes to the idea of upgrading and overhauling technology, I think, specifically what I'm asking with this question, because obviously companies are going to have different budgets and different perspectives about upgrading technology. But what I'm curious about is how do you start to decide whether this is a case of the technology being wrong and you needing to kind of evolve on that technology, or a case of, well, let's keep the technology we have but tighten up the processes or tighten up the way we're using it? When do you start to decide when the technology is letting you down or whether your processes are letting you down?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think actually the major problem that we end up facing is, I'll also frame your question a little bit differently. For us, the challenge is not necessarily whether or not we think the technology letting us down, is whether or not the next shiny object out there may be a better investment and we should abandon what we already have. We come across that question quite a bit, just because the pace of technology innovation that's occurring throughout the marketplaces is just at a rapid level, and then much faster and higher than it has been in previous years in the past. But as we're faced with those decisions, I think it is extensively to your main question of, as we just look at it from a business as usual view, should we continue to make investments? Should we continue to maintain? Well, we always what we always anchor back onto is what is our end-up roadmap. From the technology is a means to an end, and that end should be what that experience looks like, what you think, what your strategy and objectives are. And an evaluation is done periodically, at least the way that we've approached it is we've periodically looked at it to see, is it adding to the feature set and the experience that we're looking for, and is it doing it in a relatively good cost-effective manner? There may be other technologies that are out there, but you have to weigh that against what level of investments is going to be to buy in into it, because to rewrite systems, to change technologies is not a trivial thing. Unless there is a brand new feature functionality set that is afforded by a new platform, a new technology, and that is critical to the overall strategy of what you're trying to accomplish with the customer, then it's probably not worth looking at or investing in. If it meets those criteria, then that's when you want to do a little deeper dive and start going back through things like the previous characteristics talk about. How does it achieve your objectives? What is the total cost of ownership? What does the spectrum of the environment look like? You should be making larger investments for the long. You should be making large investments for the long term rather than for the short term chase.
And then sort of the final point, now I alluded to the idea of the agent experience a little bit when it comes to using technology, but curious how you weigh the agent experience versus the customer experience. I mean, I actually spoke to someone recently who basically said that even though they knew that like upgrading their CRM was going to be great for their ability to connect with customers, it was a challenge because the agents at first just refused to get on board. They wouldn't put the data in. They wouldn't really connect with it. They wouldn't learn how to properly use the CRM tool. And so there was kind of that source of agent frustration. So I'm wondering, as you start to look, I mean, obviously I think there's broader culture concerns about the customer coming first and all that, but at the end of the day, how do you prioritize whether this will make things better for the customer versus whether this will make things better for the agents who are serving those customers?
Yeah, for me, and our experience has been is that they're actually the one and the same. The agents themselves, their job, and I think what they really want to do is provide a great experience to the customers. The pain points that they raise up, so the examples you talked about, CRM, and the pain points of actually inputting information, we ran into that problem too, and we ran into some of those concerns. But really what it fundamentally came down to was, as the client is on the phone with them or waiting for an answer from them, they're troubled with putting this information into the system and just tracking the ticket. And we've all had that within our organizations. The fundamental problem though is that they just want to get that off the plate so they can have 100% focus and attention on the customer that's on hold with them right now in the moment to provide them the best answer they can and the best experience they can. To me, the question you raised, I think is one and the same. We wherever there may be improvements to the agent, it has to be and ultimately lands to how the end customer experience is going to be. Because if we make it easier for our agents, we then make it easier and make a speedier answer to our customers.
I think I love that that's what you said in response to the final question, because it really does serve as a good way to tie this entire discussion together, that idea of if we're talking about why, then really thinking about the entire impact on the business. You mentioned in financial terms that may be the total cost of ownership, but in customer experience terms, it's really looking at what is the net impact on the customer experience and its ability as a function to drive the business. And I think that instead of looking at individual technology for, wow, I would love to have that feature in my contact center, or man, my agents are going to hate having to do this extra step now. Looking at it for, well, what does that do for the ability to satisfy customers, create loyal ones, and grow the business? If that minor step leads to agents having better connection with the customers walking away happier and more loyal, it's probably worth it. If, on the other hand, that extra step means that agents are actually now spending less time on the phone, or more frustrated or not able to connect, it could be a problem. So really looking at not just what the immediate implication is, but what the long-term ramifications are for what you're trying to accomplish, the kind of contact center you want to be, the kind of customer experience you want to deliver. Answering those questions will then tell you how to weigh the pros and cons of individual investments and changes.
Absolutely. So you have to have those as fundamental principles, and you have to always go back and anchor against it.
Great. Well, I want to thank you very much for providing some amazing insights in this session. I think also surely getting everyone excited who is going to be attending CCW Fall in Austin. If they're not, I'd imagine we're going to see quite a few signups after this session, because I think that, you're really hitting on the kind of challenge that a lot of organizations are going through. And it seems like not only are you just kind of proposing great sounding ideas, but it seems like you've confronted a few of these challenges in your organization. You still confront these questions in your organization, and you've kind of set up a framework that allows you to think through those. And the ability to share that framework, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of people who are rising to the position where they're going to be making big, if not financial investments, certainly resource investments in transforming their customer experience.
Absolutely.
And for those of you who've been joining us, this has been CCW Fall Online. We're thrilled that you took part in our event. Remember, the sessions may be over for the day, but the live exhibit hall is still open, so you can go there, go to the booths, download the free content, and then, of course, check out the remaining sessions that are recorded, as well as the remaining sessions that are going to be coming up on CCW Fall. This has been an honor to be moderating today's sessions. I look forward to continuing to connect with you as part of the CCW digital community.